I remember the day he vanished. Not from the world. No, Bill Gates didn't fake his death or retire to a secret island like some eccentric mogul from a spy novel. No, his vanishing act was subtler. One cool autumn morning, Bill simply walked out onto the streets of Manhattan, and no one saw him because he wasn't Bill Gates that day. He was a homeless man. Let me back up. That it all started a few months earlier. Gates had been in New York for a summit, one of those high-profile gatherings where billionaires talk about solving the world's problems over sparkling water and sustainable canapés. But something had been bothering him. During one of his morning walks, right around Central Park, he noticed the same thing again and again. People in tailored coats and noise-canceling headphones walked past the homeless like they were ghosts that he watched as a man, barefoot and holding a sign that read, "Just hungry," sat ignored for hours. Nobody looked at him. Nobody asked his name. That it was a pattern. And once Bill saw it, he couldn't unsee it. He began noticing the blank stares, the quickened steps, the small polite evasions people used to avoid eye contact with the suffering. These weren't bad people. Most had Venmo charity receipts and climate-conscious grocery bags. But when compassion required pausing, really pausing in their day, that's when it broke down. And so the idea took root. What if he became invisible? What if, just for a day, he walked a mile not in someone else's shoes but in someone else's silence? That's when he called in his people. Not the foundation team, not even his assistants. Just one trusted friend from college who happened to work in practical effects for Broadway. They met in a quiet apartment in Soho and designed the look: ragged jeans, layers of faded flannel, unkempt beard applied with cinema-grade adhesive. They weathered his skin with subtle makeup enough to suggest weeks without shelter, but not enough to look theatrical. He didn't want sympathy from a camera. He wanted truth from strangers. And then, one Thursday morning, Bill Gates became no one.no security. No fanfare. Just a man with a backpack, a cardboard sign that read, "Anything helps," and a quiet seat beside a downtown subway entrance. The first hour passed slowly. A woman walked by pushing a stroller. She didn't even glance down. A man in a suit tossed a half-empty coffee cup into the trash near him, accidentally splashing Gates's shoes in the process. No apology. At one point, a dog sniffed at his hand. The owner tugged the leash back sharply and muttered something Gates couldn't hear. By lunchtime, he'd counted 217 people walking past him. 3 looked him in the eye. None said a word. He shifted uncomfortably on the cold concrete. The pain in his back wasn't part of the disguise. That was real. So was the growing ache in his legs from sitting still too long. He wasn't cold exactly. The layers helped, but he felt a chill deeper than temperature. It was the chill of being unacknowledged. Of being erased. Time slowed. The city didn't. He started to wonder if anyone at all, would notice him. Not because he was famous, not because he was rich, but because he was human. And then something happened. Just after 3 in the afternoon, as the sun dipped between the glass towers and the wind picked up off the river, a man walked by and stopped, not dramatically. Not with a gasp of recognition. He just paused. He looked down at Bill, or rather, the man he believed to be homeless, and offered a tired smile. "You okay?" he asked. Bill looked up, startled. Not because of the question, but because of the tone. It wasn't pity. It was genuine concern. The man reached into a plastic bag and handed Bill a bottle of water and a wrapped sandwich. "Didn't have much, but figured maybe you could use it more than me." Bill could barely speak. The man didn't ask for thanks. He didn't stick around to be praised. He just handed over what he had, nodded once, and turned to leave. That's when Bill stood up. "Wait," he said, and his voice cracked. "Please. Just wait." And right there, in a quiet alley off 8th Avenue, away from the rushing feet and indifferent glances, the man turned around. Bill stepped closer, made sure no one was watching, and slowly peeled off the beard. The stranger's eyes widened. He didn't shout. He didn't scream. He just stared, confused, as Bill Gates stood in front of him, no longer invisible. And then came the words that would change both of their lives. He didn't blink. The man, early 30s, maybe, scruffy but kind-eyed, just stood there as Bill Gates wiped the adhesive from his cheeks and pulled the matted wig from his head. No grand gesture. No slow-motion movie moment. Just a quiet unraveling of a disguise that had lasted all day. The silence between them felt like glass. Thin, clear, but fragile. Wait, the man finally said. Bill nodded slowly. Yeah. You're Bill Gates. Bill smiled sheepishly, if you can believe it. I was starting to forget that myself. The man took a step back, holding the sandwich still in one hand, like his body hadn't caught up with his mind. Why were you? He stopped. I mean, why would you be out here like this? And that was the question, wasn't it? Bill looked at the sidewalk, then back at him. I needed to see something. Something I thought I understood from reports and interviews and statistics. But I didn't. Not really. I thought maybe if I sat out here as someone without a name, without money, I'd see what it feels like to be unseen. The man nodded slowly, still piecing it together. You picked a hard street for it, he muttered, glancing down the avenue. This city moves fast. Doesn't look back. Bill gestured to the bag in the man's hand. And yet you did. The man shrugged. Didn't seem right. You looked like you needed it. Bill smiled again, this time, warmer. I did. They stood in that narrow stretch of alley, just the two of them, as horns honked and footsteps clattered on the sidewalks beyond. And for a moment, the world outside that space didn't exist. What's your name? Bill asked. Luis, the man replied, almost reflexively. Luis Mendoza. He said it with a kind of modest pride. Not boastful, just grounded. He wasn't expecting anything. Not even gratitude, and Bill could see that. You from New York, Luis? Originally? No. I came up from Houston a few years back. Was doing odd jobs, construction, warehouse stuff. Got laid off last winter. Been piecing it together since. Some weeks better than others. Bill's eyes narrowed slightly. Not in judgment, in calculation. The way he looked at a problem when he was trying to solve it. Luis caught the look and raised an eyebrow. What? Bill chuckled. Sorry. It's a habit. I hear someone talk about piecing things together, and my brain starts running spreadsheets. Luis laughed, the first real laugh of the day. Man, this is the weirdest afternoon of my life. You think? Bill said, grinning. Try being a billionaire in fake facial hair for 6 hours. You win this round. They both laughed now, the sound bouncing softly off the brick walls. Then Bill grew quiet again. You didn't just give me food, Luis. You gave me something I haven't felt in a while, not like this, anyway. You saw me. Luis looked confused. You're Bill Gates. Everyone sees you. Bill shook his head. No, they see the name. The headlines. The net worth. But today, people walked past like I was invisible. And you? You looked. You helped. You didn't need a camera or a reason. That matters. Luis didn't know what to say. And that's when Bill reached into his backpack, the same ratty one he'd used as part of his disguise, and pulled out a small envelope. That it was plain. No logos, no branding. Just a name, scribbled in pen, Luis Mendoza. That he handed it over without a word. Luis opened it. Inside, 5 crisp $1,000 bills. And a card. On it, just 2 lines. Thank you for seeing me, let me return the favor. Luis stared at the money. Then at the card. Then back at Bill. Wait, what is this? It's a start, Bill said. But not the end. What do you mean? Bill took a deep breath. I run a foundation. We work on education, health, equity. But we also look for people. People with heart. People who do the right thing when no one's watching. I don't need more advisors. I need more people like you. Luis blinked. Are you offering me a job? Bill nodded. Training starts Monday. If you want it. There was another silence. This one warmer. Luis didn't tear up, not exactly, but something in his eyes softened, like a weight had shifted inside him that he looked down at the envelope. This could change my whole life. Bill nodded. Good. That's the idea. And then without fanfare, without press, they shook hands, the billionaire in rags, and the stranger with kindness. By the time Bill's car came around the corner to pick him up, he looked back once more. Luis was still standing there, still holding the sandwich, still wondering how a moment of empathy turned into something extraordinary that it didn't take long for word to spread. But it didn't come from Bill Gates. It came from the sidewalk. The very next morning, a barista from a nearby cafe posted a blurry photo on social media. Just two men in an alley, one handing something to the other. Nothing flashy. No red carpet moment. Just a caption, "I think I just saw Bill Gates give a homeless man $5,000 and a hug." New York is wild. At first, no one believed it. Photoshop, they said. Clickbait. But then came another photo, this time from a delivery driver, who recognized Gates walking up 8th Avenue without his usual security entourage. Then another post from a woman who'd walked past and almost recognized him, but dismissed it as impossible, and then, 2 days later, the clip surfaced, just 8 seconds. Shot from the far side of the street, shaky and a little too zoomed in. But clear enough. You saw the moment Bill pulled off the beard. You saw the stranger Luis reel back, stunned. The internet did what it does best. It exploded. #Gates in disguise trended for 3 days straight. News anchors speculated. Talk shows joked about it. Late-night comedians pitched wild theories. But somewhere beneath the laughter, something deeper started to stir. People didn't just react to the stunt. They reacted to the reason. "I walk past folks like that every day," one user wrote. "And I've never stopped. Today I will. I used to think being kind wouldn't change anything," another post read. "Maybe it changes more than we realize." But while the world buzzed, Luis Mendoza was walking into a very different reality. That he showed up Monday morning to an office in Midtown, nervous and early. He'd borrowed a clean shirt from a friend, shaved, and carried his only tie wrinkled and slightly too wide in his coat pocket. The receptionist smiled as he entered. "You must be Luis," she said. "How?" "Mr. Gates told us to expect a man with heart." That didn't help the nerves. They brought him to the 14th floor, quiet, sleek, all windows and soft lighting. A young woman named Clara greeted him with a tablet and a smile. "Orientation's mostly virtual," she said. "But Mr. Gates wanted to speak with you first." He was waiting in a small conference room. No assistants. No cameras. Just Bill, in a sweater, holding 2 coffees, black, no sugar. He asked, offering one. Luis nodded slowly. "How did you?" "Lucky guess." They sat. Bill didn't launch into a speech. He didn't even open a laptop. Instead, he asked, "How are you feeling?" Luis stared at the skyline for a moment. "Honestly? Still feels like a dream. I keep waiting to wake up in that alley again." Bill leaned forward. "Good. Because people who never forget where they started, tend to go farther." Luis looked at him. "What do you want me to do, exactly?" Bill smiled. "Start by listening." He explained that the foundation had launched a new initiative, one focused not on policies or billion-dollar grants, but on micro-impact. Real people. Real lives. And they needed someone who could bridge the gap between the boardroom and the sidewalk. "You know what it feels like to be overlooked," Bill said. "Now I want you to help us make sure fewer people are." Luis blinked. "I'm not a social worker. Or a nonprofit guy. I didn't go to college. Neither did a lot of the world changers I know," Bill said. "What you have can't be taught in classrooms." For the next few weeks, Luis trained with the foundation's outreach team. He rode along on site visits. Met with people facing eviction, hunger, displacement. And with each story, something shifted in him. That he wasn't just handing out help now. He was listening, guiding, connecting that he wasn't being rescued. He was becoming the rescuer, and little by little, something else began to change not just inside him, but around him. One day, about a month into the job, he was walking through Union Square when someone tapped his shoulder. "Excuse me, are you the guy from that Gates story?" Luis turned, caught off guard. The man was young, holding a bag of bagels and looking slightly embarrassed. I just wanted to say, that moment it meant something to me." Luis smiled, unsure what to say. "I walked past someone yesterday," the guy continued. "Then I stopped. Gave them food. Sat down with them for 10 minutes. I've never done that before. But I remembered your story. So, thanks." Luis nodded. "It's not about me," he said. "But I'm glad you stopped." And that's when it really hit him, the sandwich he gave wasn't just lunch for one man. It was the spark in a much bigger chain. A kindness echo. One that didn't just bounce back. It multiplied. By now, people knew Luis Mendoza's name, not in the way they knew celebrities. He wasn't trending anymore. He wasn't being followed by paparazzi or signing autographs. But in community centers, youth shelters, online forums, Luis had become something rare, a real person people could actually believe in. No spin. No spotlight. Just a guy who had once been overlooked, and decided he wouldn't overlook others, and yet, none of this had been part of Bill Gates' plan. It was meant to be one day. One lesson. A private moment with a stranger who happened to have a good heart. But that moment had cracked something open. Because when the story leaked and then grew legs, and wings, and 1,000 reposts, people started asking a different kind of question: what if more people were tested like that? And then, what if we didn't need a disguise to see who cared? That's when the Foundation's inbox flooded with messages. Teachers. Nurses. Truck drivers. College students. People from all walks of life writing in with just one ask: give me a chance like you gave Luis. I want to help. I saw someone yesterday and didn't stop. I want to change that. It caught everyone off guard. Bill called a meeting. Not with PR. Not with donors. With Luis. He sat across from him, late in the evening, the city lights glowing outside the tall glass windows. "People are listening," Bill said. Luis tilted his head. "To what?" "To you," Bill replied. "Or at least, to what you represent." Luis looked uncertain. "I didn't ask for that." "I know," Bill said. "That's why it matters." They didn't plan a campaign. There were no billboards. No hashtags. Just a quiet new program launched 2 weeks later. The Echo Project at IT had a simple purpose: find people who helped without being asked and help them in return. No press releases. Just action. A woman in Philadelphia who bought winter coats for 3 kids waiting at a bus stop. She got a job offer at a city shelter. A retired mechanic in Denver who fixed bikes for local kids on Saturdays. He got a grant to open a small repair shop that doubled as a free community workshop. None of them knew they were being watched, they just acted with heart, and in the background, Luis helped guide it all. He reviewed the stories. Called the nominees. Traveled across the country to meet the helpers face to face. Sometimes they cried. Sometimes they laughed nervously and said, "This must be a mistake." Luis always answered the same way: "You made someone's day better. Now it's our turn." The stories weren't flashy, and that was the point. They didn't feel like headlines, they felt like hope, but it wasn't just the helpers who changed. Luis did too, because as much as he had given that day on the street, a sandwich, a bottle of water, a moment of kindness, what he received in return had changed his trajectory. And now, the same thing was happening in reverse. One morning, in a small town outside Seattle, Luis visited a school to speak with teens about the Echo Project. As he shared his story, a boy in the front row raised his hand. "Can I ask something?" Luis nodded. "Of course." The boy looked nervous. "How do you know you matter when the world doesn't see you?" The question was raw. Too real for a kid his age. Luis took a moment before answering. "I didn't," he said honestly. "Not always. Some days I thought I was just background noise. Until someone saw something in me that I didn't. And then I realized the world doesn't always see you. But that doesn't mean you're not worth seeing. He looked around the room, making eye contact with every face. Sometimes you have to be the one who sees yourself first. And then, when someone else shows up, it just confirms what you already knew deep down, that you were never invisible. There was a silence after that. A full, unmoving silence. The kind that says, "We heard you." Meanwhile, Bill Gates, the man who began this whole thing with a single act of curiosity, watched it unfold with quiet amazement that he rarely spoke publicly about the experiment anymore. In fact, when asked by reporters, he usually smiled and said, "It wasn't about me." But privately, he kept a framed photo on his desk. Not of himself. Not of Luis. Just that alleyway. Two figures. One handing the other a sandwich. No context. No label. Just the moment, because that, more than anything, was the story. A moment. One decision to stop. To give, and everything that followed: the emails, the projects, the stories, the lives changed. It all echoed from that. It had been exactly 1 year. 12 months since Bill Gates sat on a cracked stretch of pavement outside a subway entrance and waited, not for money, not for fame, but for someone to see him. He got that and more, and now, Luis Mendoza stood in that same spot. And no cameras. No announcement. Just him, a bench nearby, and the steady rhythm of New York footsteps around him. He wasn't there to test anyone. Not like Bill had. This wasn't a stunt. It was something more personal. A quiet return. He sat down on the same cold concrete where he once handed over a sandwich, unaware that a billionaire was hidden under layers of dust and flannel. He looked different now, cleaner, more confident, but somehow the same. That same softness in his eyes, the same steady breath. In his hand was a brown paper bag, inside a bottle of water. A fresh sandwich, not symbolic. Just real. Luis had come back to the sidewalk for one reason: to remember. Not just what happened, but why it mattered. A woman passed by, mid-30s, in a gray coat, earbuds in. She glanced at him, quickly looked away, and kept walking. A minute later, a teenager skateboarding by offered a polite nod but didn't stop. Then came a man in his 50s who actually slowed, but only to check his phone. Luis wasn't discouraged. He wasn't looking for anything. He was just there, present. That's when someone sat next to him. An older woman. Frail but alert. She didn't ask who he was. Didn't ask what he was doing. She just exhaled, looked around, and said quietly, "This city can be lonely, huh?" Luis smiled. "It can be. But sometimes it surprises you." She nodded, slowly. "I used to work 2 blocks from here. Retired now. Still walk this route out of habit." He offered the sandwich. "Hungry?" She looked at him for a second. Then smiled, "Touched only if you'll split it with me." And so they did. 2 strangers on a sidewalk, sharing a sandwich. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't go viral. But to Luis, it felt like closure. The world kept moving around them, fast, loud, distracted, but for a moment, that corner of Manhattan felt still. Later that evening, back at the foundation office, Luis sat down with Bill for one last meeting. He didn't know it was the last. Not yet. They talked like usual. Reviewed field reports. Swapped stories. But something in Bill's tone was different, lighter. As if a chapter was ending. "I think I'm going to step back," Bill said, eyes out the window. Luis turned. "Step back from what?" "From all this. Not disappear. Just, make room. For people like you." Luis frowned. "You built this. Why stop now?" Bill smiled. "Because it was never supposed to be about me. And if it's working without me in the middle, that means it's working." There was a pause, then Luis asked, quietly, "Do you ever miss it? The sidewalk, I mean. That moment?" "All the time," Bill said. "But you know what I miss more? The way it made me feel. Small. A little scared. But awake. Luis nodded. That's why I went back today. Bill looked at him. And? I shared a sandwich, Luis said. With someone who didn't care who I was. Just that I was there. Bill smiled wider now. Good. That's the whole point. A few weeks later, Luis officially took over the program. He didn't throw a launch party. He didn't give speeches. Instead, he did what he always did. He showed up. Quietly. With intention, and that same day, a woman in Cincinnati who had been anonymously paying for groceries for a struggling neighbor opened her mailbox and found a note, "We saw your kindness. Now let us return the favor." Inside was a check. No signature. No logo. Just an invitation to keep helping and the means to do it. The Echo Project had become what it was meant to be, not a headline, not a trend, but a living thing. A ripple. Luis never tried to lead with a loud voice. He led with presence, and every time he sat across from someone who didn't know they'd been noticed, he remembered the very first time someone saw him, a tired man on a sidewalk who still had kindness to give, even when he didn't have much else. Some stories end with applause. Others with endings so perfect they don't feel real. This one. It ends the way it began, with a quiet decision to stop. To look. To give. No disguise. No spotlight. Just one person reaching out, and the world changing in small, invisible ways because of it, and maybe, just maybe, that's enough.